Hey everyone, welcome to a new edition of the program presented by Novig. My guest this week, Mark Pantoni, the general manager of the Ohio State Buckeyes football program. Here's my conversation with Mark. This episode of the program is presented by Novig, the peer-to-peer sports prediction market with no house, no hidden fees, and the best odds in the game. Whether you're a casual fan or a sharp trader, Novig lets you play smarter, win bigger, and make sports picks in a whole new way. And it's available in over 35 states. Learn more at novig.us/Woj and use code the program for a match up to $100 on your first purchase. Welcome into Mark Pantoni, the general manager and director of player personnel with the Ohio State University Buckeyes. Mark, thanks for jumping in with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to do this.
No, absolutely. And I want to start here with you, Mark, and your background and your journey to becoming one of the really the first and preeminent now front office executives in college football. Started as a young person at Florida with Urban Meyer before he had, at a time when they were winning national championships. And tell me how it began for you, what your background was, and how it might differ from maybe some of your peers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was doing pre-med at the University of Florida. And, at the time I had finished my undergrad and I was interviewing for medical school. 12 to 15 more years of school plus being in debt, that didn't sound too attractive at the time. So on the side, I was working for the track team at the University of Florida and the track coaches. So that helped me get my foot in the door in football. And I always had a passion for team building, following. I was a huge college football fan at the time. And, once I got that opportunity, I fell in love with it right away. Now, when I would show out, I show up every morning at 6:30 in the morning, and my first task was to handwrite like 400 envelopes. So after the first couple of weeks, I'm like, man, I'm really turning down medical school to go this path. But I was just a sponge, and I just wanted to soak it all in. Like you said, I didn't play football as a background, and so I knew if I wanted to get an advantage, I had to learn as much as possible. And luckily at the time I was around Coach Meyer and a lot of great assistant coaches that later became head coaches. And, like I said, I was a sponge and just took it all in as much as I could.
I remember Jeff Van Gundy when he was the young head coach of the Knicks and, had played Division III basketball, certainly was, shorter in stature, had not been an NBA player. And I remember talking to him about that his edge with his players had to be that that they knew he didn't sleep, he didn't rest, that he spent all his waking hours trying to, show them that he could help give them an advantage to get better as players, to win games. And when you start in that role, is that part of the mindset that you've got to win the credibility and respect of people in the arena?
Absolutely. I think having a work ethic, first one in the building, last one to leave, never asking for anything. Young guys want to ask for, where's my t-shirt, where's my shoes, where's my, whatever. Just putting your head down and grind. And when you do that, people start to notice. And if you do a great job with it, people really notice. And so that was my whole passion of, I'm going to be the hardest working guy in here. I'm not going to leave until basically I'm kicked out to leave. And I want to show the people, that I'm working for that this is, I'm serious about this and I want to prove myself. So, ask questions, just work extremely hard and great things are going to happen for you.
Mark, also to, think of the differences in recruiting in that era at Florida and now what recruiting looks like at Ohio State. You said, sending out, you mentioned, addressing 400 envelopes, probably, I'm guessing, high school coaches, high school players. families, recruiting. Uh, Thinking back to then, how dramatically different is the job of college player personnel pre-portal, pre-NIL era?
Couldn't be any more different. Back in 2006, there was no social media at the time. So, like you said, handwriting envelopes was really the main way to recruit high school kids and their families. Back then it was still VHS tapes, logging them in DVDs. There was no huddle. There was no, streaming to get video. You'd have to mail out the stuff and hope high school coaches would send it back. So you fast forward to now, back then at Florida, it was really myself and one other person running a recruiting operation at the time. Fast forward to now, and it's such a difference in the business aspect. Up until 2 years ago, I never thought I'd be dealing with agents, never thought I'd be reading contracts, never thought I'd be determining how much a player's valuation is going to be, both in high school and at the college level. And so, over the last 2 years ago, I really had to dedicate myself to focus on salary caps, reading as much as I could, literature wise, how the NFL operates and learning how to negotiate with agents. And it's now that is one of the primary responsibilities. And there's really little interaction now with the kids and the families, like I used to do, just because now, I have to negotiate, with them. And then I don't want to be biased as I'm doing that to where I can have a bias or favor toward different players. And so, it's different in the fact that I used to have great relationships with these kids out of high school. I would text them every day for about 2 years straight, have them here for 3 to 4 or 5, and then still talk to them when they went in the NFL. And now it's like, I'm almost isolated on an island, I feel like some days, and get the players look at you funny because they know you're going to determine, how much the money they're going to make. And I understand it. And so, my goal is to try to be as fair as possible with the team, to make 90 football players in that locker room happy. You know it's not possible.
Right.
And so, you just try to explain you're just being as fair and try to develop a championship winning team. You can't put all the financials in, the top 10 players, and otherwise you're not going to have the best team available.
You said something that's interesting to me, Mark, is the idea that you're a little more disconnected, maybe a lot more disconnected from the relationship building that you once had with players. And I think that's part of the reason many of us are here is, to be able to give young people an experience. Certainly winning is going to be important wherever you are. But, certainly that human part of it, I'm sure you've got players from Florida, from Ohio State who come back and see you and you played a role, even it was just helping get them to your program with an experience they probably look back very fondly on. But now that you have to negotiate deals, make very difficult decisions, does it take some of the emotion out of the process? Does it help you probably to be more clear-eyed when you make some of these financial decisions, which you know uh, kids and families in many respects are going to be unhappy with sometimes?
Yeah, for sure. And it's a fine balance of the assistant coaches are developing these relationships with these families and the kids, and they feel strongly about their evaluations. And then I'm kind of like Switzerland, where I have no attachment to where I'm evaluating the film, coming up with grades, and then also valuations on how much money we're going to be able to pay them to be fair in that locker room. And so you almost have to take the emotion out of it. You don't want to have feelings into it, where if you have relationships, it may lean you into potentially making bad monetary valuations um, and trying to bring in the top players who are the right fits.
Before we continue, I want to highlight a tool that has become increasingly necessary for anyone conducting business or research online: Surfshark VPN. We're all aware of the risks associated with digital tracking, and Surfshark provides a streamlined way to protect your data and maintain your privacy. A virtual private network, or VPN, safeguards your entire online presence by encrypting your data the moment you connect to the internet. This is particularly useful for securing public Wi Fi connections or bypassing geo restrictions to access information and content that may be blocked in certain regions. One of the more practical aspects of the service is that a single subscription covers all your devices simultaneously, from your phone to your desktop. For those looking to enhance their digital security, Surfshark is a reliable option to block malware and prevent snoopers from monitoring your activity. It is a straightforward utility designed to keep your personal and professional information private. You can secure your digital life today by going to surfshark.com/Woj or using the code Woj at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. The service includes a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. Again, visit surfshark.com/Woj or check the link and code in the show notes for more details. In talking to a few people who are uh, far more well-versed than I am on the football side from this last, portal window, which I know still ongoing for you now, that there was a feeling that the salaries changed a little bit from last year in that schools were still paying, you know, for elite players and difference makers, those numbers certainly hadn't come down. They had gone up in many instances. But teams are maybe holding the line more on developmental players, maybe a little more interchangeable, marginal starters. Is that how you found it, or do the economics not look much different than you? The economics of team building look much different than you a year ago, pre-house?
It's actually changed a lot in a year. The market has only gone up, and even with the cap, it's the agents are still, they're pushing the market as much as they possibly can, and so now having with the house settlement, having a cap that we're all trying to follow the guidelines on, and then on the top of that, supplemented with the third party marketing, um, it's definitely more challenging in that regard. And I would say now I think the Indiana model in football has showed us that having older players, having an older team does mean something. And so philosophically, we are trying to determine, okay, how much financials are we going to put in the high school world now? How big is the high school class going to look now? And then is it better in the long run, or really in a one season model, to go in the portal and take older, more proven guys rather than trying to pay a lot of money to get kids here out of high school, and they're probably not going to play a lot in year one, maybe year two, and then you're having a lot of dead money. And so those are all the conversations we're having right now and Indiana's kind of paved the way this year with how they did it, and I think a lot of teams are starting to look at that model now.
Yeah, and I think that's the push and pull, right? Of um, you know, you have access to, if you're Ohio State, you have access and the ability to recruit the best high school players in the country. But like you said, there's that question of how quickly can they, two things, right? How quickly can they help us? What's the cost of players who may not, it is hard to put an 18-year-old out against 23, 24, 25-year-old. In some cases, that's hard in basketball. It's even harder in football. But then also, can we retain them? And are you investing money? If it doesn't happen quickly enough for the player, are they inclined to jump on you, get in the portal? That's the push and pull on the younger player. Because I also think too, Mark, to me, it's not that much different than pro free agency. Typically, to me, in professional free agency, you have to overpay in free agency. And when you have a player in your environment, they're comfortable with it, they're bought in. And I'm not saying there's always a discount, but there's still the uncertainty of what if I leave, especially when you feel like you've created a good environment for them. I think that makes the high school younger player model versus the older one, um, really challenging to decide, how you're going to go forward.
Yeah, well, agree. I think at the end of the day, like you said, culture is number one. That's how teams win, is the culture in that locker room. So we do want to have a strong foundation with the high school kids and the development of them as your core foundation, and then use the portal as a way to supplement and fill holes. Ideally, just almost as starting levels. And we're not trying to go in the portal to fill depth spots because, like you said, you're going to have to overpay in the portal regardless. So we'd rather have the young high school guys ready, as the backup or the threes, if there were injuries or something were to happen, to be ready to play. And that's why we recruited them to begin with, is because we believed in their talents and they're a great fit in that locker room. So it's a little combination of both as best as we can do it. I think the hard part we felt this year was the guys who just finished year one and going into year two, who may not have played a lot, but the market has dictated, maybe some potential increases they thought they deserved, and without a lot of production behind it, and that's where we had to make some really tough decisions.
And I imagine too, you become such a target for people to try to poach your players. Hey, if Ohio State gave this young guy a scholarship, we know he's really good. We just know it. And certainly, even if guys aren't in the portal, it doesn't matter. They've got agents; they can go out. Even if they're not contacting the player directly, the agent is able to, or somebody else around them. That's got to be a challenge in retention, especially for a young player who hasn't broken through into your lineup yet.
Yeah, I would say over the last 2 months, the one thing I've learned is how many agents actually exist. I mean, every day it was 10 new phone numbers coming in of, hey, I'm so and so. Here's my list of guys I represent. Let us know if you're interested, and they're thinking about going into the portal. So, but yeah, like you said, if they're shopping other teams' players around, our guys are on those lists that are being sent to us.
Yeah.
So it's like you
Yeah.
said, you're
And,
having
yeah. And
energy on trying to save your own guys.
that's right, Mark. And my favorite part of that is when you get the same player's name from 4 different agents,
Right.
because none of them actually have the player,
That's right.
but they're recruiting them, or we're close. And all of a sudden you're going, how many different guys are going to text me the name of some player, that A's not in the portal and B, they don't even represent. And that creates a level of chaos too, in the marketplace. Um, when you think back to what recruiting used to be, I imagine it was probably, you had a recruiting coordinator, you had position coaches who focused probably on their positions in recruiting. How different does the infrastructure look at Ohio State in terms of how you've had to build out a front office, whether it's, having scouts, whether it's having folks who are in there, grad assistants, consultants? What does an Ohio State front office look like beyond the coaches who are obviously going to be very involved in recruiting?
Yeah, it's almost like a delineation now between personnel and recruiting staff. And so on the personnel side, you now have high school personnel, and you have the college side of personnel with the portal and free agency, so to speak. So it's almost now where you have to have your personnel group working on high school film year round, which is starting freshman, sophomore, junior, and then senior film. And then on the portal side, you're having to, watch anybody who you think who could be a potential target and what your needs are going to be. And then relationships still do matter. So you do have your recruiting staff who's going to plan unofficial, official visits. They're going to be kind of the liaison with the coaching staff of as a contact for the families and the kids. And so you're seeing, a big delineation now. Whereas before it kind of was hand in hand, the personnel recruiting kind of did both work together, so to speak. Now you almost have a fine line of, like you said, and almost NFL front office and then old school college recruiting staff.
Hearing about the strategy behind roster building reminds me of how Novig approaches sports predictions. It's all about making smart plays with the best odds. On Novig, you're in control, matching up directly with other fans, not the house. No vig, just fair matchups. Learn more about Novig, America's #1 sports prediction market, at novig.us/Woj, and use code the program for a match up to $100 on your first purchase. How much, Mark, too, do you, when there's, you said you're evaluating the potential players who could be in the portal, which is, it's infinite. I mean, it just is infinite, right? It's everybody.
That's it.
And so you've got to be ready for everybody. And, you know, there's only so much ground, even the biggest operation like Ohio State, there's only so much ground you can cover. How much of it, with so much uncertainty out there, do you find yourself leaning back even harder on the places you have strong relationships, the people you trust? When they tell you they've got a player for you, you've got an honest broker, you've got somebody who you think, hey, we partnered with them. And I think that's the word for me. that's so important. Listen, um, you, you're always going to have to meet new people in this, and you're going to deal with new agents and maybe different parts of college football or the country you haven't. But when you have had success with somebody, they've sent you a player, and that player's developed and gone on, they want to send you more. Do you find yourself leaning back toward those people in this climate?
Yeah, it's extremely important. That is definitely one aspect. I think too. I think before geographically, there were certain areas of the country you felt better about going into. I think right now, the farther you go from the Midwest and the state of Ohio, the price tags are going to go up based on distance. It is something that I've found. And so instead of like, in the past, you want to find out what the kids' hobbies are, what they like to do outside of football, what girlfriend's name, now the key question is who's your agent? How important is NIL going to be to you? And, when you get them on campus, these are all, the things you're trying to venture out and see, okay, is this kid going to be worth the time and energy? And two, what do we think it's going to cost? If we think it's going to be a huge number and we're not willing to do that, okay, then we have to make some decisions and move elsewhere. I think so. You're going to see, at least like with us at Ohio State, we're going to put a lot more time and energy in the state of Ohio and Midwest, even more so than we did before, because like I said, to try to get kids from California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, NIL now makes it even more difficult because every school's got rev share, every school's got money. And so they're not just coming to Ohio State anymore because of NFL development, great coaching staff, opportunity to win national championship. There's a price tag involved now too. And so you have to be willing to meet that price tag. And so those are all, everyday decisions that we gotta try to venture out.
And I wonder too, Mark, when you are deciding on young players and high school players to come into your program, the decision you have to make among players you want to bring in and develop at Ohio State or players that might go a rung below Ohio State or even two rungs below Ohio State, um, they might be able to impact quicker there. And then know that you're going to have you'll probably have an opportunity at them in the portal later. And so do you find yourself maybe bringing in more guys on unofficials or officials that you're probably not going to get right now, but you think 2 years from now, I need to have a relationship with that young man and his family?
1000%. We say a lot of times now, coming in second place is not a bad thing anymore
Yeah.
because if you come in second and something happens with school number one they pick, then and it's happened with guys we've had, that they didn't have a great experience at school one, and because we were the runner ups out of high school, we ended up getting them back. And I will say too, just to answer, like when I form a recruiting class now, it's like, okay, you have X number of first round draft picks where you're going to go at them no matter what it's going to take.
Right.
Then you're going to go try to get the bulk of your class is going to be the day two guys in the draft, which is, rounds, 2, 3. And then you're going to have your day three free agent guys, which is going to be a handful of guys in the draft. So, like you said, there's going to be more unofficials now because just because they're a day three, those guys still have value as backups now. And you hope that you hit on some of them, just like the NFL teams do, to where those guys potentially could become starters and you hit on a guy that, maybe you didn't have to invest a lot coming out of high school.
Mark, how important is, the background information that you've always had to do on players? And, you talked about in a different time, you got to know a kid over a couple of years. You got to know his family. You probably got to see him in some adversity, how he handled it. You might have spent time around his family. How does he talk to his parents? How do they interact? There's so much less of that. It becomes, especially when you get in the portal. Um, do you feel sometimes you're going in, you want to get as much as you can, but you're going in a little more blind in the portal about all those intangibles that are really hard to gather up if you haven't spent time? And you can make calls and everyone's going to do that, but there's a little more uncertainty because of just the shortness of the relationships. Like you said, you're dealing with the agent. You just may not spend as much time with the player as you were able to in the past.
Yeah, high school, you're able to. We almost do it as like a job interview for high school kids when they come here because you're going to have them around a few times, and being able to just watch them, all their intricacies, how they interact with their families, Are they engaged at practice when they're watching practice, or are they on their phones? So little things like that. But when you hit the portal time, everybody's just fighting to get a visit, and things are happening so fast, and it's almost like an NFL 24-hour visit where you're getting them for quickly, and you got to make a decision quickly. So you really have to have people you trust on the staffs of where they're coming from, hopefully, to really get all the details of what you're going to be getting, because we're very deliberate about who we're going to put in that locker room. Again, culture's number one. And so we do have to make some really, fast and sometimes tough decisions without having all the information available.
You just said one there, Mark. That's a good tip for high school players, for their parents. When you go on a visit, when you're going to be on campus, put the phone away, shut it off, put it in your pocket. That is one that I've found myself, even when you bring him to a meeting with the academic side and it's listen, we're all guilty of it. We all have to be on our phones. And so I'm not pleading innocence to this, but it, it is something we watch with players, and it's probably not a bad idea to just put that thing away. You can text everybody after the visit and tell them how great Ohio State is. Um, but there is something to how they're engaged, because it speaks to how you want them to be engaged when they're in film and when they're in practice and when they're interacting with their teammates, right?
Yeah, 100%. And they love football. And they love academic. Coach Day says we're not too cool to go to school here. Like, you're going to go to class and you're going to do well, and we're going to make sure of it. So again, we want the right fit, guys that are mature. We don't want to, like you've heard before, the phrase "coach killers," that just take time and energy away from doing football stuff and not chasing them around, making sure they're on time, and all those things.
That's great. Mark, this was fantastic. Continued success at Ohio State. Appreciate you taking time to jump in here with me on the program.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me again.
Thanks, Mark. A big thank you to my guest this week, Ohio State football general manager, Mark Pantoni. Join us again next Wednesday for another edition of the program presented by Novig.